cows, come on. Come on, cows. Come on, 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 cows, come on. Come on. Come on. Good cows. So what's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna clear up a little bit of confusion, and it's something that I've gotten a lot of comments on, I've gotten a lot of emails about, and that's what's the difference between rotational grazing and mob grazing, because they're not the same thing. You see, mob grazing is a version of rotational grazing. So you can't have mob grazing without doing some sort of rotation. Okay, it's kind of like this. All Catholics are Christians, but not all Christians are Catholic. So it's just a version of rotational grazing that, in my opinion, and by the results that we're having here, are much, much better. What rotational grazing means is simply by just sectioning off a section in your farm and letting that rest, and then moving your cows back and forth. That is really what rotational grazing means, and how it's practiced in just the much larger sense. You see, most ranchers that rotationally graze will go and leave their cows in a pasture for a month or two, and then once that pasture's gone, move them to a new pasture. Now, is that good? It's good. We'll talk about good, better, best. Because even just moving your cows that little bit will improve your pastures. Why? Because any kind of movement, rather than just turn them out and let them continuously graze, is always better. And why is that? Because in nature, ruminant animals, cows, bison, gazelle, zebra, all the above, they move. They're never in the same spot 2 days in a row, and that has a lot of benefits. In nature, when grass-eating animals do that on their own, what it does is it just gives the pasture, it gives that land time to be able to rest and regrow, rather than have the grass grow back this much and have it be grazed again, because that's what the cows see, that's what they have. Although rotational grazing is good and it's better for the animals, it's better for the land, and better for you, there's better ways to do it and better ways to improve upon that. There's two important numbers when taking into account the rotation, and that's 4 and 12. Why is that important? Because once a grass blade is grazed, it takes 4 days for the grow back process to start happening. And if you graze that same grass blade again after that 4 days, it's gonna end up stunting it, and you're not gonna grow as much grass. 12 is actually a probably even bigger reason. 12 is the days that it takes for parasites to start forming behind the animals. So from the day that the manure drops out of the backside of the cow to the day that the parasites start forming is 12 days. So when rotationally grazing, at least take into account those two numbers. Now, would it be best to move them every 4 days? Yes, it'd be best to move them every day. Would it be really good, really beneficial for you to move them every 12 days? Yes. Why? Because if you move them every 12 days, which is almost just about twice a month, you'll be able to move them away from their parasites. And what does that mean? It means that here, we don't worm. We don't do any kind of ivermectin, we don't do any of that kind of stuff. Why? Because we don't need to. And the reasoning that I have behind that is because the cows are never in the same spot for 12 days. If they're in the same spot for 12 days, we'd have to. Why? Because they're gonna pick up parasites. Even though we're running longhorns here, they're gonna pick up parasites. But if we move them and they're not in that same spot 12 days later, they're just not going to pick them up. I mean, they might pick up a couple here and there because that's the way the world works. But for the most part, they're not going to be overloaded with them. And the parasites they do pick up, they'll be able to kick. Why? Because it's a very tiny amount. So right now we have the good by moving the cows just every couple months in between your pastures. We have the better by moving the cows, you know, every 12 days so they're getting away from their parasites. We have the, we'll call it the better just messing around, call it the better, moving them every 4 days so they're not stunting the grass. And now we're going to talk about the best. The best way, in my opinion, and the results are really showing it, to move the cows to rotationally graze. The best version of rotationally grazing is mob grazing. You see, with mob grazing, the biggest difference between mob grazing and rotational grazing is that the cows are constantly mobbed up. Now, are they mobbed up today? Kind of, to a degree. We're in where this is the last day of April. Tomorrow is the beginning of May. So here in East Texas where we are, we're right in the middle of the spring flush and the grass is going berserk. We're having a hard time keeping up with it. We're probably about a week behind the grass right now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But back to the mob. You see the cows, we have 21 here and 2 llamas. For the most part, they're in a group in a smaller area. Why is that important? Because what it does is it promotes competition. When they see a cow here, they see a cow there, they're gonna rush to eat whatever they can, because guess what? Pretty soon, the grass is gonna run out. Maybe not the case necessarily in spring, but in summer and fall, absolutely. And if you wanna do any kind of winter grazing, yes, that is a huge, huge factor. And last year we saw the benefits, especially in the wintertime, because of this. We only fed hay, get this, for 50 days. And I made mistakes. I made mistakes where I mowed it. I think that if I didn't make those mistakes, and this year, we would only have to feed hay for half that time, maybe 20, 25 days, which is a huge, huge cost savings. Can you do that up north where it snows and there's 6 feet of snow on the ground? No. Here in East Texas, yes, absolutely we can do that. But the thing is that it's not the norm. Everybody around here still feeds hay on average for 180 days a year. And why is that? Because we move the cows every day. They have that competition. They're eating everything, which improves our pasture because they'll even nibble on some weeds that they necessarily wouldn't eat if they were just turned out to, to graze continuously. But really what that mob grazing does is that it gets the absolute most out of the land. And that's really important. You see, you have to either buy or lease the land, you have to pay taxes on the land. Why not get the most for it, get your most bang for your buck, and this is the best way to do it. Like I said, by mobbing them up, they're not as picky, there's a little bit more competition there. The grass is grazed, like here, for 1 day. It's grazed for 1 day, and then it has a 30-day in the spring or a 60-day rest period in the summer. What that does is it allows it to grow back like this. We are just starting to see the little bits of Bermuda starting to pop up, but we've been grazing for months already on the cool season grasses, and that's what's up here, and the cows are thriving. And then also by moving them every day and having them mobbed up, it really spreads out their manure a lot better than any other form of either rotational grazing, or even if you left them in there 4 or 5 days and then moved them. If you mob them up, their manure is going to spread out a lot more, and that's so important because there's places when you continuously graze, go look in your pasture if you're doing this, okay? There's going to be places where the manure is much more concentrated. Why? Because it's their hangout spots. Especially in the summertime, their hangout spots are going to be under the trees. Out in the middle of the open pasture, there might not be as much manure. Why? Because cows don't like it there. When you turn out your cows to continuously graze, you can kind of see, okay, at 3 o'clock you have an idea where they're gonna be. At 10 o'clock in the morning you have an idea where they're gonna be. They're usually probably gonna sleep in the same spots. So what happens? It adds too much impact in those specific areas. And even if you're doing that, every 12 days, guess what? One area of your pasture is gonna be a lot more just concentrated with manure and a lot more impact than another. When you mob graze them, they're just looking for grass. They're just looking for grass. Now, will they sleep in the same area? Probably, but the manure load is spread out just big time. Your pastures need that fertilizer. Your pastures absolutely need that fertilizer. When you just turn your cows out, sometimes during the summer, they like to go get in the forest. Is that manure really gonna do any good in the forest or in the woods? No, it's really not. Why? The trees, they'll take it, but they mostly, thrive off of like fungal fertilization kind of thing, especially if there's deeper forest or real thick. There's not much there that's gonna really use it too much, so you're wasting it. You're taking nutrients from the pasture and taking it to somewhere that's really not gonna use it. But when they're mobbed up, they're more apt to be able to spread it out everywhere. Therefore, fertilizing your pasture is the most natural way possible. There's so many benefits to mob grazing compared to just, turning your cows out and continuously grazing. And even if you just rotationally graze them, just move them every, hopefully every 4 days at least minimum, preferably every 12, that way, they're getting away from their parasites, or at least a couple times a month. It will just benefit you so much more. You're going to be able to grow exponentially more grass than just turning them out there, especially if they're mobbed up. It saves you money, you can have more cows, and the cows are going to be happier. Why will they be happier? Because every day you're moving them onto fresh new grass, and you're keeping the same level of forage moving through them. They're not getting the secondary stuff. They're always getting the absolute best. And what happens is the rumen balances out, and they get used to the absolute best, and they're going to perform better on the absolute best, which in the end just means more gain on the cows or better condition on the cows. We've been only doing this a little over a year, maybe almost 13 months now. We're still in the 12-month range. And we're seeing a big difference in the pasture. When I just moved them, I just walked through a whole big patch of white clover that wasn't there before. Why? Because that clover seed that has been in the ground for who knows how long, because a seed can stay in the ground dormant for up to 1,000 years. You have to realize that that seed bank's there. It just needs the right conditions for it to sprout, for it to really start going. That white clover's there. The cows are gonna go hammer that, but guess what? They're not gonna take it all the way down to the bottom. Why? Because they're just gonna eat the top. That's all they're gonna have time to eat. And then tomorrow, we're gonna move them to the next paddock. And it's so simple. You can see right down here, it's hard to see on camera actually. It's actually difficult to see in person, which actually keeps the pasture a lot nicer. We're not out there setting up wires every day. What we did is we sectioned off our 30 acres into 31 acre paddocks. You might say, oh my gosh, how much money did it take to set up? Barely any, because we're using these. This is one of them that broke. But we're using these fiberglass posts that cost 67 cents, drilled a hole through them with the drill press. Running 17 gauge, not the 12 gauge high tensile, 17 gauge wire just through them. Have a T-post on each end, like you can see right here. Then have a gate with a poly wire there, and that's all we do. It's how we have our system set up. And then in the springtime, we're running them through here, sometimes 2 acres a day when the spring flush is just starting to hit, which would end up being 2 paddocks. Or like right now, what we're doing is 1 acre a day, so that gives us a 30-day rotation. If we, in the summertime, we want to cut that down, what we'll do is we'll run one of the temporary lines from fence to fence and give them half an acre, get them more mobbed up, give the ground a lot more time to rest. We have 21 cows on 30 acres. That math shouldn't add up. It shouldn't add up, but guess what? We have more grass here than anybody else around here. Why? Because the systems that we're implementing. The aim here is to grow as much grass as possible. I'm technically not a cattle rancher. I'm a grass farmer. I'm a grass farmer. The more grass I produce, the more cows. The cows are the byproduct. If I focus on the grass, the byproduct's there, and that's with the cows. So if you change your thinking and say what's best for the land, the production will follow, and that's with your stocking density going up. So in summary, the difference between rotational grazing and mob grazing is that mob grazing is a form of rotational grazing, just a lot more management intensive. The cows are moved every day, it grows more grass, it's better for the cows, it's better for the grass, and it's better for you. Hey, if you're one of these guys that is continuously grazing, do an experiment. Cut them off from half of your farm for a month. See what happens to the other half, and then turn them in there and go back and forth. And guess what? Hey, when you see those results, try it then every 2 weeks, then once a week, then move down to where if you're doing it every day, you're gonna have an explosion of growth. And just what we're seeing here, my gosh, it's just so good, it's so nice and so green, more grass than anybody else. So hopefully that clears up any questions that you have for you guys. So if you want to see more videos like that, hit the subscribe button down below, ring the notification bell so you get notified when we put up new videos. They'll send you an alert on your phone or an email. Hit the like button because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm, and drop a comment if you like, alright? Until next time, see ya.